Welcome, gente del grupo Grite. Eh, Hoy tenemos un encuentro muy especial con no solamente un invitado de lujo, sino que además tenemos dos invitados de lujo. El primero es Thomas Tessier, uno de los autores más reconocidos sobre literatura de terror en Estados Unidos. Lamentablemente su obra no ha sido publicada en castellano, pero es una persona que está escribiendo desde finales de las décadas de los 70 hasta la actualidad y es uno de los escritores tradicionales con más renombre dentro del circuito de terror dentro de Estados Unidos. Y en esta conversación, y para ayudarnos con la traducción, tenemos un traductor de lujo también, que es Pablo Martínez Burkett. O sea, tenemos dos escritores de terror de primera línea dialogando entre ellos y no puedo estar más feliz y contento con tener estos dos lujos de personas ayudándonos en esta conversación. Así que welcome todas las personas que van a mirar este video por nuestro canal de YouTube. Recuerden que Pablo es un invitado a nuestras jornadas que van a realizarse el próximo jueves y viernes de noviembre en el Pacurondo. Y sin más dilación, comenzamos con esta charla con Thomas Tessier. Pablo.
Okay, Mr. Tessier, welcome. Thank you very much indeed for your presence over here. Fernando said something about your a little version of your resume as a horror writer and your position in the scheme of the best horror writers nowadays, and he regrets that your works haven't been translated to Spanish yet. So we have the chance, or I have the chance to read two of your novels, Nightwalker and The Fog Heard, and it really, if I may say that, they mesmerize me because this particularity of your writing, going back and forth to the reality and the delusional or even the hallucination, for me was great. So
thank you.
Let's start with the first question. Let's kick in by saying that according to the Wikipedia biography, you start as a poet. Your first publications were poems. So everybody over here wants to know how come a poet went to the horror side of the literature.
Thank you for asking. I started out writing poetry when I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, and wrote through my teen years into my early 20s. And I also wrote plays during this period, a couple of which were professionally staged. But as I was getting into my 20s, I felt that neither poetry nor theater were the voice I felt most comfortable writing with and could do the things that I wanted to do. And so I eventually moved to try my hand at fiction, prose fiction, which for a long time, in my youth, I did not really think I could do. But when I wrote my first novel, The Fates, I immediately felt like I had found my voice.
Your voice.
My full voice. and that I was comfortable in the form of prose, and I felt completely at home for the first time.
All right. Let me add, if you please, um, what or who would be your ancestors, as our um, well-known writer Jorge Luis Borges said of the predecessors, where we the fountain of our inspiration, the horror writers that you took into account to feel at home with your first novel?
I should add that from the time I was a very young age and started reading, I was always attracted to ghost stories, horror stories, stories of the unknown. One of the earliest stories, short stories I found as a child, was a tale called The White Wolf of the Hartz Mountains, which was in the Supernatural Omnibus of Montague Summer. So I read those stories from very early on. They led me to Poe and to other writers. And as a child growing up in that period, I saw The Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, any number of horror movies, science fiction horror movies. So that was a side of literature that always appealed to me.
Yeah.
When I got around to start writing it, I would say it was Poe and Sheridan Le Fanu, the Irish writer, whose novella Carmilla struck me very deeply.
Yes, Sheridan Le Fanu. Yes, is quite a reaction to the Victorian age and the.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Okay. Fernando, your next question, please.
Has mencionado la novela The Fates y el monstruo principal de esa novela es una nube eléctrica que destruye todo lo que toca. ¿Cómo llegaste a concebir un monstruo tan original a finales de los 70?
Okay. Fernando would like to know, all of us, that the monster in the Fates is an electric cloud, kind of. And we want to know, how did you come to think of a creature as so different from the conventional at the age? You know, not a fly, not a Godzilla, not a big ape or a big, I don't know, big alien or a big female. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm not sure how I came up with that. I was trying to find a vehicle that would wreak havoc and violence and uncertainty among the people of the town. And rather than make it a specific monster like something that grew in the swamp or an alien from outer space, I wanted to leave it as vague and uncertain as I could. And although it was my first novel, so there was a lot of learning process going on there for me. And
yes.
I would write it very differently if I were doing so today, obviously, but it was kind of finding my way. And where it led me, I think, eventually was to the point of, I don't want to resolve it and put a kind of forced ending on it and limit the reader's ability to make of it whatever they want or whatever they see.
Let me, Fernando, ask a question about this you are born in Connecticut,
Yes,
then you went to Ireland
yes.
and so many places in the UK,
London, I
and
live.
then go back to the USA. I think I believe in Connecticut again. I'm true.
Yes,
It's
that's
true.
right.
All right,
Yes,
that's all right. Okay, how Connecticut is part of New England, the
yes,
the first colonies.
yes.
Um, I, my, I myself uh, really I'm very fond of the New England places. I know all the New York Upper State,
Uh-huh.
Connecticut, Providence, and so
Good.
on. I still uh, have gone to Maine, but
Huh?
Sleepy Hollow and all of them, I'm visit the places. So considering the special and particular natural environment of the New England and the melting pot of many, many horror writers, how do you consider that this kind of environment influence in your writing?
Uh, I'm not sure I really know how to measure that. I love Washington Irving. I especially love Hawthorne's stories. Uh, and I'm very aware of and enjoy the traditions, the local legends, and everything of New England, especially Connecticut and extending into Upper New York State. Um, so I'm aware of them. I've read them. I've all my life. It's very hard for me to uh, kind of figure out how and to what extent they influence my work. I think that's for others to do.
Is in
Uh,
the surrounding, is the lore of the surrounding, isn't it?
yes, exactly. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right,
Fuera.
all right, okay.
Mi pregunta es, sus primeras novelas son relativamente cortas, tiene pocos personajes y está muy concentrado en esos pocos personajes. ¿Eso fue una decisión estética hecha a propósito o es una decisión estética hecha en relación a sus primeros tanteos como escritor?
All right. Fernando said that in your first novels, we can see that you write about um, a few, very, very few characters. One, two, three, a triangle, or not much further.
Right.
And he would like to know if this was an aesthetical decision or was just how it burst.
I think that's, excuse me. I think that's partly the influence of the time I spent writing plays and theater. And I was always looking for those moments that Strindberg described as the moments of thunder and lightning between a small group of people. And I've always felt most comfortable with
Indeed.
that kind of a story rather than, the large scale of many people, many characters over a period of time that we see in some of Stephen King's best work is when he portrays whole groups of people and citizens.
Yes,
I've
and they are
always,
crossing from novel to novel.
yes, yeah, exactly. Whereas I've always just felt comfortable working mostly with a smaller group of people in a certain situation.
All right. La segunda parte, Fernando, ¿cuál era? La primera era de los pocos personajes. La segunda,
Que la acción está muy concentrada en ellos, pero la respondió.
ya está, sí.
La
Ok.
respondida.
Mr. Tessier, we would like to know, considering the size of your, or the amount of pages of your first novels, for an age that maybe a novel was considered the double of the triple of this amount of pages. If you don't have any kind of trouble with the publishers to publish precisely the aforesaid novels.
No, I had no problems. I had my first publisher in the United States asked me if I planned to write longer novels. And I said, I hope so. But basically, each novel I've written is to the length that felt right and took the story to where it wanted to go.
Yeah.
So most of my novels are on the slender side.
Yes.
And that's just the way, that's as comfortable as I feel.
Okay, good. Good. So it was a personal decision.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Emiliano would like to know your opinion about the saga when you, for instance, the Vampire Diaries of Anne Rice and so, that you write a first chapter or first novel, and then a second, third, and so on, like G.R.R. Martin, or even it's another, it's fantasy, but I forgot absolutely the name of the Harry Potter mother, but well, that's lady from the UK.
What's the word, Sarah? What is that?
Saga is when you
A
saga
series
came
of
from,
novels
yeah, saga came from
interconnected. Yes.
the Old English, the Old Norse, and was the stories about the conquerors and the Vikings and so on. So in Spanish we say saga when you have a compendium of many novels related to the same environment, to the same universe. So you have for instance, in Harry Potter, you have a first book, a second, and I don't know.
Okay, no. I've never really thought of it that way in terms of my own writing. Is each story, each novel has tended to be whole in itself, and I don't think of them as part of a larger group or interrelated in any way. In some ways, I think I reacted to what I just finished writing. When I wrote The Nightwalker, I really wanted to try to do a werewolf story. When I followed that with the Phantom, I very much wanted to write a quieter kind of ghost story. It was dedicated to my very young son. So there was a noticeable lack of violence and gore and the sort of nasty things that happened in The Nightwalker. When I went and wrote a novel called Finishing Touches, it was, again, very dark, very violent. And the next book I wrote was Rapture, which I wanted to be a completely different kind of story without all the sort of gothic trappings of and the gruesome horror of finishing touches. So I've gone in. I think I've tried to go in slightly different direction with each book.
Sorry for the bark of the dog. We have
I didn't hear it.
a Pomeranian that self-perceive as a bulldog. So sorry for that.
No,
So we can resume your answer saying that you always was trying to explore the boundaries of the genre. The first one, I now understand why a werewolf novel has no werewolf, isn't it?
yeah. Yes.
Great. This is for me. This is gold. What you share with us, because now I understand how it plays the character, the main character, and these. I really love these hurricane of changes. Who is who? Where am I? I'm dead in what? Really,
Right.
really love this novel.
Thank you. I
You
really,
deserve
I
it.
really wanted to keep this question of ambiguity between, is he really becoming a werewolf, or is it all just in his head?
Yes, or is just the man who the army believes is dead in and this is a kind of, I don't
Right.
know, projection or werewolf or monster. Good.
Yeah.
Next question, guys.
En su novela Forjard, que es una novela que gira alrededor del tema del duelo, Grite, hay un momento muy hermoso en donde se menciona que un personaje deja de ser parte activa de la vida después de la muerte de un ser querido y pasa a ser un observador simplemente de la vida. Me parece un pasaje maravilloso. ¿Cómo llegó a esa novela? Es una novela, ¿cómo llegó a una novela que gira tanto alrededor del tema del duelo?
Okay. Fernando would like to know, would you repetirías la frase, por favor?
La frase es, estamos hablando de una persona que perdió un ser querido y dice, dejó de ser una parte activa, una persona activa en la vida, a ser simplemente un pasajero de la vida que mira la vida.
All right. In your novel,
Oh, Heart.
Folkheart,
Yeah.
there is a phrase that I try to rephrase what Fernando said, that when somebody departed, or something, somebody is deceased, it ends or finish as an actor of the life to become a observer of life. And for Fernando, and this is another thing I would like to stress, you coming from the poetry, your writing, even in prose, is really we can, the writers, we can see that you are pondering and you are waiting and you are playing with the words to find the proper jingle swing of the paragraph. This is the perhaps it comes to the as playwright too. So Fernando would like to know, this is a very romantic, a very very deep understanding of life. So you were today you are a person, tomorrow you are just a character um, watching what happens without you.
Yes. I'm not sure I'm completely understanding the question. Especially in Foghart, I think I've gone in and out of the characters, a couple of the characters where I'm speaking as I hear their voice in my head, and other times more detached and observing what they're doing as if from the outside or at a slight distance. And it's dictated to me in a way by how each scene grows and evolves and where it proceeds to the next point.
All right. Fernando.
Bien. Con respecto a la novela Shock Waves, por momentos se lee casi como una novela romántica y por lo que he descubierto mirando portadas de la novela, pareciera que fue publicada en una edición, una serie especial llamada Dark Shades, The Darker Side of Love, Shock Waves. Mi pregunta es, ¿fue escrita especialmente para una colección de romántica?
Fernando would like to know that your novel, Dark Shades, is a part of Dark
La novela Shock Waves.
Shock Waves is part of the collection, of Dark Shades collection, or just was another novel that you wrote and the publisher decided to put in that collection, the Dark Side of the Love, or was on purpose?
Yeah, at that time, my agent, my literary agent, offered me the opportunity to write a story for a group of 4 novels that were going to be published under the Darker Shade of Love banner. And one of the other writers was Rosalind Ash, English writer whose work I had admired. And we really had a freedom to do whatever we wanted with the basic story situation. And I chose the Shockwaves idea of a young woman, a university student, becoming falling in love with this much older man, political figure. And so I think the publisher originally saw it as more of a kind of a typical romance novel, but with spooky or ghostly overtones. And I just took the basic idea and did whatever I wanted to do with it, which ended up being a story that was, I think, much more, much darker and definitely a very unhappy ending than what the publisher was expecting. So I think Ramsey Campbell said that that Shockwaves did to romance what was never supposed to be done to romance. But they didn't, urge me to make any changes, and I wrote it the way I wanted to. It was an interesting experiment, but I wouldn't do it again.
All right, good. Um, may I ask, we are talking about relationships, love, intercourse, and so on. How significant is the presence of the erotic for the developing of your stories?
I think it's very important. At the time I started writing, my friend Peter Straub and I used to talk a great deal about horror and where it was coming from and where was it going.
Good.
And we both felt very strongly at that time that there was very little erotic content in most horror stories that we had read. It actually is present going back to Lefanu and Walter Mackin, but very, very kind of disguised and almost subliminal.
Yeah.
And I felt strongly that to create real characters, you had to be aware of their romantic, sexual, erotic life to the extent that it factored in the story. And so, yes, I was, more outspoken in my writing about it, and at times more explicit
Yeah.
than had been the norm.
Yeah. For those times, I think 3 novels in the terms of 5 years changed forever the significance of the meaning of horror, making horror massive. I'm referring to, of course, Rosemary Baby of Ira
Yes.
Levin, the other of Thomas Tryon, and The Exorcist from William Peter Blatty. They open the horror genre to the massive public. Since before that, horror was considered, some second-hand kind of
Yes.
literature. But with these 3 novels, that I think is my personal understanding of the thing, is they were the because the horror, have a personal dimension, something that spooky yourself, but is common to all the humankind, and the social dimension, how the horror express itself through the community, the horrors of the community. And for those days, after none, after the kind of changes that the 60s made in the century, 20th century, they changed everything, and
Yeah.
the horror was not outside. It was
Yes.
not a monster outside. The monster was inside, and the evil, not the monster, is inside,
Yeah.
and the evil take part with things that it's supposed not to be hit, like an innocent girl of 12 years old, like an unborn baby child, and the twins of the other. So I think they open the door to the 70s, that Stephen King, Peter Straub, all these great writers were part of the social dimension of the horror. So it was a sexual decade, So after that, we enter in another dark age, and the sexual was kind of not forbidden, but put away of many of the horror novels. So I think it represents the point of the age, according my view, my humble view, of course.
No, I think you're entirely right.
Thank you.
It's very much a progression from the alien, the outside influence into the heart of darkness in people.
Yes, yes, indeed, indeed. Preguntas.
¿Podría compartir algún recuerdo sobre Peter Straub?
Would you like to share with us and our audience a memory with the late Peter Straub?
Sure. Yes. Peter is my best friend ever. We first met back in a pub in Dublin in 1970. And we both were writing poetry mostly, and gave a couple of poetry readings together in Dublin. And he was also writing a novel, and that became a novel called Marriages. And when that was accepted and to be published, he and his wife Susie moved to London. And although Peter and I stayed in touch by mail, it was maybe 2 years later, the publishing company I was working with in Dublin offered me a job in their London office to oversee the start of a new company that would be called Millington Books. And so we moved to London, and our friendship just continued to grow from there between Peter and myself. And he actually, we talked a lot about horror, and he and his agent made the decision that he wanted to try to write what we called then a Gothic novel, which became Julia.
Yeah.
And he in turn encouraged me constantly to write a novel myself. So that is where my first attempt at writing fiction came from. And our friendship just grew over the years. Back here in the United States, we were living in Connecticut. Peter and Susie were also living in Connecticut for a while and then moved into Manhattan. He's a strong influence on all of my writing habits. His devotion and his sense of discipline were incredible, and very helpful to me to emulate. It was not so much our writing styles, which are very different. In a sense, it made it easier for us to work together as writers, helping each other, because we were not so much competing with each other in terms of style and technique. He wrote these massive cathedral-like novels, and I wrote my slender, much tighter little novels. And it was just the greatest friendship you can imagine between two writers.
Good. I would like to stress that your kind of fiction is much more fun of me, because I always, as a writer, are playing with these when the familiar became unfamiliar, and you don't know in which side are you. So I read your your books with this particular emphasis and joy, because it's the kind of horror novels that I like, because this is, I think, the real deal with horror. You are a regular guy that just turn the corner of your block,
Yeah.
suddenly you are in wherever, in the middle of a hurricane.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You deserve it, really, sir. You deserve it. Chicos, ¿más preguntas?
Emiliano.
Sí. Quería hacer una pregunta acerca de algunos de sus relatos. Ciertos relatos suceden en lugares remotos, alejados de los centros de las ciudades, y en estos relatos el protagonista usualmente busca de manera voluntaria aislamiento. Quería saber si Thomas piensa que estos espacios alejados de los centros, de las metrópolis, etcétera, conducen o son propicios para la transformación o para el renacimiento de personajes que al empezar el relato están quebrados, están acabados, y este aislamiento les sirve para una suerte de renacimiento.
Emiliano, I try to rephrase the question. Emiliano wants to know that many of your short stories, the character is a broken soul that, for reasons of the plot, goes to a remote place where the character, the main character, on purpose seek for isolation.
Yeah.
So, do you think that these special places far away of the big cities, of the big urban metropolis, are more propitious to develop, to rebirth the broken soul of the character?
Yes, thank you, Emiliano. That's a good question. It's, I think that there are two impulses going on in the characters. One is to get away from themselves, and the other is to find themselves. And I have done several stories that way. You're correct. And I think that what my characters find is that, of course, you can never get away from yourself no matter where you go, but you can still be reacting in ways to your new situation that may tell you things about yourself or about themselves that they hadn't seen or known. So one character crosses the Sahara for no real reason. He's leaving something behind and finding something in himself and encountering a situation he couldn't have imagined. Another character was a travel writer who flies to among the least likely of places to get away, and he's getting away from part of his life through the story called Blanca, and encountering a whole new real world situation that puts him up against himself and what's he going to find and so on. So I love that situation in general of someone going somewhere and finding more than they hope to find, and sometimes for the good, but not always.
Not always.
No.
In this same way of question, um, we could say that you often explore the darker side of the human nature.
Yes.
And if you could create a horror character inspired by one of your everyday annoyances, what would they be like?
I,
I'm going out of out of the you know the script, but I would like to know as a fellow writer.
what are everyday annoyances to me?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what kind of character would produce these your everyday annoyances?
I'm not really sure. My everyday annoyances are very trivial. Um, just the usual things that bother people. If there's a cold or unhappy with the weather or whatever.
Emiliano.
Bien, en relación con esto que decía Tomás, quería saber si él tiene algún interés particular en trabajar con personajes traídos del mundo real, de la vida real, a la ficción. Por ejemplo, hay relatos en los que ha utilizado como protagonistas, por ejemplo, Joe McCarthy o a Adolf Hitler. Quería saber si tiene algún interés, si le interesa trabajar con este tipo de personajes o si fue algo eventual.
Emiliano would like to know if, considering that you, in some of your stories, you evoke a tired Joseph McCarthy or a young Hitler, if you are interested in working with real characters in your fiction, or was just a thing that flux according the writing?
They both came about, well, a little differently. I had, in the case of the story Curing Hitler, I had heard or I had read somewhere about the incident that he experienced in World War I of blindness.
Yeah.
As a result of being in a mustard gas attack or something. And I thought it was more a story of opportunity. I thought I could make a very short story based on that incident about the doctor who actually treated him and imagining how he would have felt years later, seeing what Hitler became. And in the case of McCarthy, that was a rather different circumstance. I was invited to contribute a story to a book called Mutilated Classics. And each story was to involve a well-known person from history or everyday life or whatever, and to do something with them. And I don't know why I settled on Joe McCarthy at the time, but I thought I could take this sort of classic old horror story idea of killer frogs and match them up with Joe McCarthy. And basically I just had a little fun writing it. But to the larger question, in general, no, I don't really have a strong interest in writing, certainly not at great length, about a character who was a real person.
All right.
Perdón, Pablo, y
Sí.
en el caso de Van Helsing, una figura literaria.
Yeah, Van Helsing, yeah.
In the case of Van Helsing, would you like to write about, of course, a literature figure, a counter figure of the good count. But would you like to write something about some character from another novel, or just is the same answer like the other question?
Well, it's the Van Helsing story that I wrote called The Infestation at Rawls was, again, it was an opportunity that was presented to me. It was a collection of stories by various writers that told a different story about Van Helsing. And I was invited to contribute a story to that. And I thought about it and thought I will try to do something that would fit in with the time period. I was invited to contribute a Van Helsing story to this collection. And I thought of it as actually as it might be my opportunity to write the kind of story that might have been made into a Hammer film. And so I had fun writing it, but it's unusual in that it's not sort of the norm of the way my stories are written.
All right.
Yes,
All
okay.
right.
Bien. Pregunto yo, muchos escritores participan en antologías, por ejemplo, llevadas a cabo por Ellen Dadlop o Stephen Jones, y muchas veces se le piden historias dedicadas a encajar el tema de la antología. Mi pregunta es, ¿trabajó en muchas antologías temáticas en donde le pidieron cuentos específicos para esas antologías? ¿Y cómo maneja trabajar para una antología en donde le dan el tema?
All right. Fernando would like to know, how do you feel? The first question is, if you wrote many short stories for compendium of short stories with some attribution of a matter or a theme or a character like Van Helsing or whatever. This is the first question. If you were involved in many of these kind of many writers, our anthologies. And the second question is about how do you feel when you have to write something with a character or a theme or boundaries preset about the writing?
Yes.
Mostly my stories have been written just as I want to write them. As a few times, as I mentioned with Van Helsing and McCarthy, I was given the opportunity, whenever I'm invited to write a story for a particular anthology of stories, I decide really on the basis of, do I think I can do something new? Do I feel like I have an idea, a situation, a setting that I can work comfortably with, so that I can write my own story and not just simply carry out something that would be expected of me. And I've had a number of those opportunities, but most of the invitations that I have received have been much more open-ended. Would you contribute a story to us? Anything you want. And I would write a story then, just following my own instincts. And I need, usually I don't feel comfortable starting to write until I've got a few characters, one, two, three, four characters, and a situation that they are confronted with, or one of them is confronted with and has to deal with. And then the story becomes a kind of exploration for me as well.
Yes, in relation, excuse me, in relation with this answer of yours, would you like to describe your creational process? You said I have to have many characters. I have a situation. How do you um, hit the idea, and how do you work the idea to finally get a story or a novel or whatever?
I take notes. I write notes. Notebook. Often I just something will occur to me. Maybe it's not even a whole idea. It's just some character, something I saw somewhere, something I heard on the news. And I'll just jot down any kind of interest that I have or any thought and go back to those notes much later, sometimes maybe a year later, and see it. And if it shows me another angle of understanding or another angle approach to exploring it, then I might take it further in a story. But I mean, ideas come to you all the time. It's really and your reaction to things in life happens all day long. It's just a question of sorting through and the ones that stick with you somehow in your head. In Fogheart, there's a very early scene where the young woman is drinking her coffee or tea, and suddenly the apparition of her father appears on the other side of the table. And I've never thought up until that moment, I had never thought about one of my characters being visited by a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
I knew something about her situation already, that there was trouble with her husband. And the ghost of her father sort of appeared briefly to kind of warn her. And that just grew out of the moment of writing. But the characters were already there because I had already thought about them and the situation and so on.
Great.
There's a lot of opportunism in finding the right ideas or the right thing that you want to do in a story.
Bien.
Yes.
Mi pregunta, ha empezado a escribir a finales de los 70 y aún así tiene relativamente pocas novelas. No es un autor muy prolífico. ¿Por qué?
Considering the period of time since you started writing, and nowadays, we could say, Fernando, is Fernando question, that you are not a prolific writer, because the number of your works are many, but not so many as another writers of at your level or at your well-known name.
Yes, that's right. When I was starting out writing horror, I found it very problematic for me to see so many other writers who would, like clockwork, produce a new novel every year, on and on and on. And I admired that ability, but I soon decided that I could not do that. I just didn't feel comfortable if I tried to force myself to write that way. The writing felt terrible, and I lost interest in doing it. And I said, well, I have nothing but admiration for the people who can produce at that rate. I mean, I don't know to this day how Steve still does it. uh, but
Yes.
but I thought I'm going to write what I write, and I'm going to write it at my own pace. And certainly the last 10 years or so, I've mostly just focused my writing efforts on shorter fiction, short stories mostly, but I have a couple of novellas that I'm still working on.
Mhm. Great.
Bien. Con respecto a la importancia que le da a la vida nocturna, en muchas de sus novelas los personajes adoran la vida nocturna, salen a pubs, clubs, van a, son tan obsesivos con la vida nocturna porque están intentando encontrarse a sí mismos o que están intentando encontrar. ¿Por qué esa recurrencia a la vida nocturna?
Okay. Emiliano said that in many of your fictions, the characters are night owls going from pub to pub or bar to bar or wherever. And but creatures of the night. So is this another way of trying to find themselves, or just is this particularity of your writing is just because?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's probably a little bit of both. When I was in the business world, I came across many people who, in fact, were in those kinds of situations where they would be out and socializing with other people, or kind of drifting and going along with it in terms of being out at night and going to bars or pubs or whatever. And it occurred to me somewhere along the line that in itself as a kind of regular activity is another way of trying to lose yourself and find something else.
Yeah.
Without traveling to the Sahara or South America or anywhere, Asia. And I think I find those characters endlessly fascinating as to what's going on in their lives that they're not happy with, and why they are as they are, and is there a way out for them, or does it get worse?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Being during many years of my life, a flying scholar or invited professor, the nights are so lonely. So
Yes.
even I prefer to stay at the hotel. I met a lot of these creatures of the night. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Emiliano.
Sí. Esta pregunta a modo de interpretación personal, tal vez, ¿no? En sus historias yo encontré, en la mayoría de sus historias, si bien hay personajes que escapan o que acaban de terminar con relaciones personales, también encontré personajes que están en la búsqueda de una relación, de un vínculo, y que no pueden continuar su vida sin esta relación, dentro de lo que sería la duración del relato, ¿no? Entonces, en el relato, sin esta relación, ellos pierden lo que sería su fuerza vital. esto tiene que ver, la pérdida de la fuerza vital tiene que ver con este vínculo, con esa relación que encuentran. Mi pregunta sería, si podría o puede ser en estos relatos el amor ser una forma de vampirismo. No sé si lo entendiste, Pablo, como para transcribírselo.
You made me easier for me. Okay. Emiliano said that this is a personal interpretation of your
Yes.
fiction, but he says that in one way, in one hand, you can find characters that had been broken heart. They were left behind for good, and they are heartbroken souls. And on the other hand, there is a lot of characters that they are seeking for a relationship. So the development of the whole plot, it depends of this seeking or even the final meeting with this another person. Uh, is this, we can call that a kind of vampirism, emotional vampirism, or is just another of your ways to portray the daily, the life on daily basis?
Both, I think it's a good question. I think it's both. There's definitely characters who exert a kind of emotional, psychological vampirism on other people are all too common in this world, as we know. And that's interesting in itself because it can show itself in so many different situations and circumstances. But it's also the other part of it was that it's something that people have to deal with within themselves and find their way out of or around.
Great.
My
Fernando?
last question es, Wicked Things, su última novela, tiene un final que podría considerarse abrupto, en donde el clímax sucede en las últimas 2 páginas. ¿Por qué tomó esta decisión?
Fernando, talk about your last work. We are considering, I reinterpret what he's saying, the Aristotle 3 parts of
Yes.
a novel or a writing or whatever. The opening, the middle of the end, and consider the end the next part of after the climax. He said that in this last work of yours, the end it takes just 2 pages. It was something that you decided or just happened.
I decided.
All right. And the next question, why?
Why? Why?
Again, I realized that was going to be for some readers possibly a problem, but they didn't like it. On the other hand, I decided I didn't want to, or I couldn't come up with some other explanation or way out. And it seemed to me that would be the kind of last thought that character would have in the circumstances. And so even though I know a number of readers have found it to be a very abrupt ending, I just felt more comfortable with it.
Great. My last question would be what, considering your career, your name, you are one of the big names of the horror genre across the world. What could be an advice for the novice of the horror who is entering in the horror lore or universe? Do you have some magical recipe or some advice to the novice? Remember, this is a faculty. This is a group of fellowships doing their works, final works. So it could be great having from you an advice or not advice or just saying, okay, keep going
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah. A few things come to mind right away. One is that aspiring writers should read a lot, and not just read horror, but read widely, nonfiction, read the classics, see how other writers put things together, see how other writers explore situations and characters. I would also say write regularly. It's a lot of it, when you're starting out as a writer, a lot of it is like getting comfortable with writing itself. The way I think of it is like learning the piano. If you don't keep doing it, you're never going to develop the kind of the comfort with your instrument. Your instrument is your writing in this case. And it's good to do that. Even if forget correcting, even if it seems terrible what you're writing, doesn't matter. Go on and continue or start something new. Read and keep an open mind. I think those are the things that I would emphasize. And the more you write, the more I notice a lot of younger writers I've worked with in the past tend to write a couple of pages and then focus on polishing it, correcting it, editing it. Don't do that. That's your first drafts are like ore dug out of the earth. You don't send it to the refinery until you've got all out, and you just keep going on and try to finish what you started, and then you can go back and see the whole thing and make your corrections, refine it down, clarify, elaborate where you want. I don't know if
Yes.
that's
A very good piece of advice. I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Thank you.
Emiliano, ¿tenés alguna última pregunta?
Simplemente me gustaría saber si está interesado en algún tipo de corriente literaria o de subgénero de terror que esté surgiendo ahora, de nuevos novelistas, si hay algún material que le interese de lo más contemporáneo, digamos.
Sí, ¿y qué autores dentro del terror y fuera del terror está leyendo ahora?
Ok. Um, and I will addition one for me. The first thing is, if Emiliano said, if you are interested in new writers, new subgenres, all the time we read about some new genres that you have to try to find what it means because you don't ever hear about that. And if you you are interested in this hybrid that intermingle subgenres that are bursting nowadays. And Fernando would like to know what do you read, or what are you reading right now, or horror or fiction in general. And I would like to add what you are up to right now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm working on another story, is what I'm up to right now. And as far what I'm reading right now, actually, is I just got yesterday a copy of Seven Empty Rooms by Samantha Schweblin, who is a younger writer whose work I greatly admire already, and I'm enjoying it. I just started it. I'm absolutely thrilled with what's happened in terms of horror literature. In the last 20 years, it has had a kind of resurgence. There are so many good younger writers out there now, writers that I admire so much. John Langan, Stephen Graham Jones, Tannereve Due. I could go on and on. There's so much more diversity enriching the horror genre. And it's to go back to what we were talking about much earlier, when I started out, Peter Straub started out writing horror, nobody actually published those few books you mentioned, Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist. They were not published as horror. They were published as bestsellers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Blockbusters.
Yes.
Publishers would never say we have a horror list.
No.
You know, one
A
of the
New York Times bestseller is always in the
yeah.
Headlines.
So I mean, Stephen largely put horror on the map as a genre that publishing actually said, "Hey, this is a good idea."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, well, we already have many questions,
Yes.
but we we don't we don't like to abuse of your generous time, your generosity. We are really honored of having you tonight over here. Your humor, your wisdom, the open arms, what you receive us and our questions. Myself, I apologize for my unpolished English, but you know, sometimes you think you know, but when you are in front of somebody like you feel I answer again, and with shaking hands and shaking knees. And so once again, thank you very much indeed for your generosity. On the name of, on behalf of my fellow colleagues over here, we would like to deeply thanks for your time.
May I say thank you to all three of you, Emiliano, Pablo, and Fernando. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it very much talking with you. I appreciate very much your interest and your attention to my work. It was very enjoyable for me as well.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye now.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hasta luego, gente. Hasta luego. Muchísimas
Chao,
gracias
chao.
por haber estado.
Take care.